Imagine two particles on opposite sides of the universe. You touch one and in the exact same millisecond, the other reacts. No wires, no signal, no delay. Einstein called this spooky action, and he hated the fact that it suggested space, as we know it, might be an illusion. Pause for a moment and really feel what that means. If these particles are connected beyond time and space, what prevents you from also being connected to everything you wish to manifest? What if the distance you feel between you and your desires is not physical, but perceptual? What if separation is not the ultimate rule of reality, but a surface-level experience? Today you will understand why science has finally validated what your intuition has always known. That connection is deeper than space, and that you may be far more integrated with your future than you ever imagined. Most people who try to attract something into their lives begin with a silent assumption that ruins the entire process before it even starts. They assume they are separate from what they want. It sounds harmless. Of course you are here and your goal is somewhere out there. The money is in another bank account. The relationship is in another city. The opportunity is in someone else's hands. So you try to send a request into the universe, like mailing a letter across a cosmic distance, hoping it arrives at the right address. But this mindset carries a hidden cost. When you believe your desire exists outside of you, you reinforce the idea of distance. And distance, in the language of quantum entanglement, is the illusion that breaks the connection. Have you ever noticed that the more intensely you ask for something, the more it seems to move away? You repeat affirmations, visualize harder, speak louder in your mind, yet internally there is tension. A subtle feeling of not having it. That feeling is not neutral, it is a signal. It says, "This is not mine yet." And that signal defines your state. In physics, entangled particles do not send messages back and forth like text notifications. They are not communicating across space. They are described as one unified system. When one is measured, the other is instantly defined, not because information traveled, but because separation never truly existed at the fundamental level. Now think about how most people try to attract something. They imagine they must project desire outward. They believe they must convince reality to rearrange itself. This effort is built on the assumption that they are one thing and their future is another. That is the mistake. If you see yourself as particle A and your dream as particle B, located somewhere else, you have already divided the system. You have mentally declared independence from what you want, and in doing so, you collapse into the state of not having. Pause for a second and feel the difference between these two internal statements. I hope this happens for me. This is part of my system. The first one carries longing. The second carries inclusion. Most attraction practices amplify longing. They unknowingly strengthen the emotional experience of absence. And what you repeatedly experience emotionally becomes your dominant state. Not because the universe is judging you, but because your nervous system adapts to the story you keep telling it. When you constantly focus on wanting, your biology registers lack. Your body tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your thoughts loop around how and when. This is not alignment. It is subtle resistance disguised as effort. Here is where quantum entanglement shifts the perspective. If two particles can behave as one system, regardless of distance, then perhaps what you desire is not over there. Perhaps it exists as a potential already woven into the larger system you are part of. The issue is not sending a stronger signal. The issue is believing there is a gap to cross. The more you perceive a gap, the more you emotionally inhabit that gap. Think about how you feel when you miss someone deeply. The sensation is not neutral. It is heavy. It emphasizes separation. Now compare that to how you feel when you are confident something is already yours, even if it has not physically appeared yet. There is calm. There is less urgency. There is less grasping. One state pushes, the other allows. Most people push. They try to control timing. They obsess over signs. They interpret every delay as proof that it is not working. And each doubt becomes another measurement, collapsing them into frustration. They are observing reality through the lens of absence, and then wondering why absence is what feels most real. There is another layer to this mistake. Many assume that attracting something is about intensity, strong emotion, strong visualization, strong repetition. But entangled systems are not about force, they are about coherence. If your thoughts say, "I trust," but your body feels anxious, you are not coherent. You are broadcasting mixed states, and coherence cannot exist where there is an internal argument. So the real shift is subtle. It is not about asking more. It is about dissolving the internal narrative of separation. Instead of, "How do I get this?" the question becomes, "What would it feel like if this were already integrated into who I am?" That question does not send energy outward. It reorganizes you inward. When you stop treating your desire as distant, your attention changes quality. It becomes less desperate and more steady. And that steadiness is powerful, not in a mystical way, but in a biological one. Your decisions shift, your tone shifts, the way you interpret opportunities shifts. You begin to act from alignment instead of pursuit, and this is where most people feel uncomfortable. Because if there is no separation, then there is also no one to blame. Not the universe, not timing, not other people. The state you hold becomes the defining factor of the system you participate in. That realization can feel confronting. It removes the fantasy of sending requests into the sky and waiting for delivery. It suggests something deeper, that your internal state is not calling something toward you. It is defining the relationship you already have with it. But to truly understand how this works, we need to step away from abstract language and look clearly at what entanglement actually means, without hiding behind complex equations or scientific jargon. Let's strip this down to something simple. When people hear the term quantum entanglement, they often imagine something mystical, abstract, or impossibly technical. Equations, laboratories, scientists arguing over probabilities. But at its core, entanglement describes something surprisingly clear. Two particles that stop behaving like two separate things and begin behaving like one single system. Not similar, not connected by a wire, not sending signals back and forth. One system. Imagine you take a single coin and magically split its behavior between two distant locations. You don't create two independent coins, you create one shared identity expressed in two places. When you check one and it lands on heads, the other is instantly defined as tails. Not because it received a message, not because it reacted, but because the system only ever allowed one consistent outcome. That is the heart of quantum entanglement. It challenges the way we normally think. In everyday life, we assume that objects are separate. If two things are far apart, they must operate independently unless something travels between them. That is the logic we are raised with. Cause moves through space. Effects follow after. But entanglement suggests something deeper. It suggests that at a fundamental level, separation might not be as real as it appears. Here's another way to see it. Picture a pair of gloves in a box. One is right-handed, the other is left-handed. You take one glove and fly to the other side of the planet. You open your suitcase and see the right-hand glove. Instantly, you know the glove back in the box is the left-hand one. There was no communication, no signal crossing the globe. The identity was already defined as a pair. Now gloves are simple. They were always opposite by design. But in quantum entanglement, the situation is stranger. The particles do not seem to decide what they are until one of them is measured. Before that, they exist in a range of possibilities. Yet the moment one is observed, the other aligns in perfect correlation. It is as if reality waits for interaction before choosing its expression. And when it does, the choice is shared across the system instantly. Let that sink in. The key idea is not speed. It is unity. We are used to thinking in terms of connection. Connection implies two separate points joined by something. Entanglement goes further. It implies that those 2 points are expressions of a deeper layer where they are not separate at all. When scientists say entangled particles form a single mathematical description, they mean you cannot fully describe one without including the other. Their properties are intertwined. Remove one from the equation, and the description becomes incomplete. Now, why does this matter for you? Because if the universe at its most basic level allows for systems that are unified beyond visible distance, then the story of strict separation becomes less solid. The idea that everything is isolated, fragmented and cut off from everything else starts to look more like a convenient model than an absolute truth. You have been trained to see yourself as an isolated individual moving through a world of separate objects. Your goals are out there. Other people are over there. The future is ahead. But quantum entanglement invites a radical shift in perspective. What if the deeper layer of reality is not built on separation, but on shared systems expressing themselves in different places? This does not mean everything is magically connected in a sentimental way. It means the fabric of reality may be more unified than your senses suggest. And here is where tension begins to rise. Because if entanglement is real, and experiments have confirmed that these correlations cannot be explained by simple hidden tricks, then it collides with another pillar of modern physics, the belief that nothing can move faster than light. If no signal is traveling and yet the correlation appears instantly, what exactly is happening? How can two particles remain so perfectly aligned without breaking the cosmic speed limit? This is where the comfort of simple explanations starts to dissolve. And as we step into that conflict, the conversation shifts from what entanglement is to what it forces us to question about space, time, and the limits we thought were absolute. For more than a century, the speed of light has stood like a cosmic wall. Nothing, according to Einstein's relativity, can travel faster than light in a vacuum. Not matter, not energy, not information. This limit is not just a suggestion, it is woven into the structure of modern physics. It protects causality. It keeps the universe logically ordered. Causes happen before effects. Signals take time to cross space, and for the most part, everything we observe respects this boundary. If the sun disappeared, we would not know for about 8 minutes, because light takes time to reach us. If you send a radio signal to Mars, you wait. Space enforces delay. Distance demands patience. Then quantum entanglement enters the picture and quietly unsettles this entire framework. When two particles are entangled and separated by miles, or even theoretically by opposite ends of the galaxy, measuring one seems to instantly define the state of the other. Not almost instantly, not very fast. Instantly, within the limits of measurement, this creates a problem. If something changed in particle A and particle B responded, then something must have traveled between them. But if that something traveled faster than light, relativity is broken. And if relativity is broken, much of modern physics collapses with it. So scientists ask the obvious question, is entanglement secretly sending a hidden signal? At first, many hoped the answer was yes. Maybe there were hidden variables, unknown mechanisms carrying information behind the scenes. Maybe the particles had pre-agreed on their responses before being separated, like actors memorizing a script. That would preserve the speed limit. It would keep the universe tidy. But experiment after experiment tightened the conditions. Measurements were changed randomly. Distances were increased. Timing was refined. And still, the correlations remained. The results could not be explained by pre-written instructions. They violated inequalities that any local, slower-than-light explanation would have satisfied. In simple terms, the universe refused to behave like two separate objects exchanging signals. So what is happening? Here is the subtle but crucial point. Quantum entanglement does not actually transmit usable information faster than light. You cannot use it to send a message across space instantly. You cannot tap one particle and deliberately control the outcome of the other to spell out words. What happens is correlation without communication, and that is even stranger. It suggests that when we think in terms of A affecting B, we may already be using the wrong mental model. Entangled particles are not two independent dots sending updates. They are better understood as a single extended system. When you measure one part, you are not triggering a distant reaction. You are revealing a property of the entire system at once. The speed of light barrier assumes there are separate things exchanging signals across space. Entanglement challenges the assumption of separateness itself. Let that land for a moment. The conflict is not about something breaking the cosmic speed limit. The conflict is about our belief that space is the ultimate divider. If two particles are truly one system, then asking how fast information traveled between them may be like asking how fast the left side of a coin informs the right side that it exists. The question loses meaning, and yet this is deeply uncomfortable. Because the speed of light is more than a number. It represents stability, predictability, the idea that reality unfolds step by step. Entanglement introduces a layer where relationships seem to exist outside that step-by-step sequence. Einstein himself disliked this implication. He believed in a universe governed by clear, local causes. He called entanglement spooky action at a distance, because it appeared to allow influence without a bridge. But decades of experiments have forced physics to accept that something non-local is real, not mystical, not magical, but non-local in the sense that the full description of reality cannot always be reduced to independent pieces interacting through space. This is where the tension sharpens. If the deepest layer of matter does not fully obey our intuitive idea of separation and signal exchange, then what else might be incomplete in our everyday perception? How much of what we call distance is a feature of our senses rather than an absolute boundary? Quantum entanglement does not destroy relativity. Both theories work incredibly well in their own domains, but together they reveal that reality is layered. On one layer, space and time enforce limits. On another, unity precedes distance. And when scientists realized that no hidden signal could rescue a purely local explanation, the debate shifted. If faster-than-light communication was not the answer, and hidden variables could not restore classical order, then perhaps the structure of reality itself had to be reconsidered. That shift did not happen in a single moment. It crystallized through a set of experiments that would become some of the most important in modern physics. Experiments designed specifically to test whether the universe is truly local or whether entanglement reveals something far more interconnected at its core. In the 1960s, a physicist named John Bell asked a dangerous question. What if Einstein was right? What if quantum entanglement only appeared mysterious because we were missing hidden information? Maybe particles carried secret instructions with them from the start. Maybe the universe was still local and orderly, and we simply had not uncovered the deeper layer yet. Bell did something remarkable. Instead of arguing philosophically, he turned the debate into mathematics. He created a set of inequalities, clear numerical limits, that any local hidden variable theory would have to obey. If experiments respected those limits, then reality could remain comfortably classical. If experiments violated them, then the universe itself would be proving that locality as we understood it was incomplete. This was not abstract speculation anymore. It became testable. Years later, experiments were designed to put Bell's inequalities under pressure. Pairs of entangled particles were created and sent in opposite directions. Scientists measured properties like polarization at different angles, carefully changing the settings while the particles were already in flight. The goal was simple: eliminate every possible loophole that could allow hidden coordination. If the particles were secretly carrying pre-written instructions, the results would fall within Bell's limits. But they didn't. Again and again, the measurements violated Bell's inequalities. The correlations were stronger than any local theory could allow. The particles were not behaving like independent objects following a shared script. They were behaving like a unified system, even when separated by large distances. One of the most famous series of these tests was performed by Alain Aspect in the early 1980s. His team refined the timing of the measurements so that the choice of how to measure one particle was made so quickly that the other particle could not possibly know in advance which setting would be used, at least not through any signal limited by the speed of light. Still, the correlations held. Imagine the tension in that laboratory. Decades of debate resting on the outcome of blinking detectors and tiny flashes of light. And each time the data came in, it leaned in the same direction. The universe does not behave according to simple local realism. Later experiments closed even more loopholes. Detectors became more efficient. Distances increased to kilometers. In some cases, measurement settings were chosen using random cosmic events like distant starlight to ensure there was no hidden coordination from the past. The message remained consistent. Quantum entanglement was not an illusion. It was not a flaw in measurement. It was a feature of reality. This is why these experiments changed everything. Before Bell, entanglement could be dismissed as a philosophical discomfort. After Bell and Aspect, it became a measurable fact. The universe was telling us through hard data that separateness is not the whole story. And here is what makes this so profound. Science did not confirm entanglement because it wanted a mystical outcome. In fact, many physicists hoped the opposite. They hoped the experiments would restore classical order, but the numbers refused to cooperate. Reality contradicted intuition. For you, this matters because it shifts the conversation from belief to evidence. When we talk about quantum entanglement, we are not speaking about poetic metaphor. We are speaking about a phenomenon that has survived the most rigorous testing physics can design. The implications are subtle but deep. If the universe cannot be fully described as a collection of isolated parts interacting only through local signals, then the framework of fragmentation begins to crack. The idea that everything is fundamentally separate, that influence must travel step by step through space, is no longer absolute. That does not mean you can send thoughts across galaxies or override physical laws. It means that the underlying fabric of reality is relational in a way that challenges ordinary perception. And when scientists accepted that Bell's inequalities were violated, they had to accept something else. The universe is not strictly local. There are correlations that transcend distance, not by breaking the speed of light, but by revealing that distance may not divide systems as cleanly as we assume. This realization does not provide all the answers. It opens more questions. If reality at its base is deeply interconnected, what does that mean for everything that emerged from that base? Every atom in your body was once compressed into the same primordial state at the beginning of the cosmos. Every particle has a shared history stretching back to a single origin. The experiments forced physics to confront non-locality, but they also quietly planted another thought, one that moves beyond the laboratory. If everything once existed in an unimaginably dense, unified state, if all matter was once one, then perhaps entanglement is not a rare accident between two particles. Perhaps it is a reminder of something more original. And that is where the sense of isolation begins to soften, replaced by a different question. If the universe began as one inseparable point, how separate are we, truly, even now? There is a quiet relief that begins to grow when you truly understand what quantum entanglement implies. Not relief in a dramatic way, not fireworks, more like a soft exhale you didn't realize you were holding. If everything in the universe was once compressed into a single dense point at the beginning of the Big Bang, then every particle that exists today shares a common origin. The atoms in your body, the air you breathe, the stars in distant galaxies, they were once part of the same unified state. Before there were planets, before there were names, before there was distance, there was one inseparable whole. This is not poetry, it is cosmology. Now pause and let that idea move from your head to your body. Every cell in you carries matter that has been here since the beginning. The calcium in your bones was forged in ancient stars. The carbon in your muscles was born in cosmic fire. You are not a visitor in this universe, you are an expression of it. When quantum entanglement reveals that particles can remain correlated beyond visible separation, it echoes something ancient. The universe may be more like a living tapestry than a collection of scattered fragments. Threads stretch far beyond what the eye can follow, yet they remain part of the same fabric. This perspective shifts something subtle inside you. Have you ever met someone and felt an immediate familiarity, as if you had known them before? There was no logical explanation, no shared history that justified the depth of recognition, yet your body relaxed, your nervous system softened. It felt less like meeting a stranger and more like remembering someone. Or have you ever thought of a person intensely, and moments later, your phone rang with their name on the screen? You can call it coincidence, and sometimes it is, but the experience itself feels different. It feels like participation in something shared. The sense of belonging does not require superstition. It requires openness to the possibility that reality is relational at its core. When you begin to see yourself as part of an interconnected system, rather than an isolated unit fighting for survival, your internal posture changes. There is less defensiveness, less urgency to prove your worth, less fear of being completely alone in your struggles. Loneliness often comes from the story of separation. the belief that you are a small, disconnected being in a vast, indifferent space. But if the deepest layer of reality includes non-local relationships, then isolation may not be the fundamental truth. It may be a surface-level perception shaped by limited senses. Think about how your body works. Trillions of cells cooperate without your conscious control. They communicate chemically and electrically. They respond to signals you never hear. Yet together, they create a coherent experience you call me. If even your own body is a network of relationships rather than a single solid thing, why would the larger universe operate differently? Quantum entanglement does not say that every thought instantly changes distant stars. It says something more precise and more humbling, that at a foundational level, systems can exist as unified wholes even when their parts appear separate. Now bring this back to your life. What happens when you see your challenges through the lens of belonging instead of isolation? When you face difficulty, do you assume you are alone against it? Or do you consider that you are part of a vast, evolving process that includes support you may not fully perceive? Belonging does not mean everything goes your way. It means you are not outside the system. You are not disconnected from the field of existence. You are woven into it. There is comfort in that, but also responsibility. Because if you are entangled with the larger fabric of reality, then your internal states are not trivial. Your patterns of thought, your emotional habits, your unresolved fears, they are not sealed inside a private bubble. They shape how you interact with the whole. And this is where the feeling of belonging can shift into something more intense. If interconnectedness is real, it does not only amplify love, intuition, and harmony. It also means that fear, scarcity, and trauma can echo within your system with equal power. Entanglement is neutral. It reflects coherence, whether that coherence is built on trust or on anxiety. So the question becomes deeper. If you are part of an interconnected universe, what exactly are you aligning with on a daily basis? What emotional frequency are you rehearsing? What internal story are you strengthening through repetition? Belonging is comforting, but it is not passive. It invites awareness. And as that awareness sharpens, another layer emerges, one that forces you to confront the risk of being unconsciously entangled with the very patterns you wish to escape. There is a side of quantum entanglement that most people prefer not to look at. It feels inspiring to imagine that you are connected to opportunity, love, abundance, and higher possibilities. It feels empowering to believe that reality is relational and that your inner state matters. But entanglement is neutral. It does not choose what to amplify. It simply reflects coherence within a system, and that is where the danger of negative synchronicity begins. Have you ever noticed how certain problems seem to repeat in your life? Different faces, same pattern, different job, same tension, different relationship, same emotional wound. It can feel like bad luck, like a curse, like the universe is testing you. But what if it is coherence? If your nervous system has learned to expect rejection, it subtly prepares for it. Your tone shifts, your posture changes, your interpretations lean toward threat. You might read a neutral message as distant. You might withdraw slightly before the other person does. And when distance finally appears, it feels like confirmation. This is not mystical punishment. It is alignment. In quantum entanglement, two particles remain correlated because they are described as one system. In your life, your thoughts, emotions, and biological responses also form a system. When fear becomes the dominant pattern, it does not stay abstract. It organizes perception. It filters choices. It selects interpretations that match its frequency. And then something unsettling happens. Reality starts to look exactly like what you fear. You think, I always struggle financially. And you begin to notice every bill, every unexpected expense, every missed opportunity. Your brain highlights what matches the narrative. Over time, the pattern strengthens. It feels external, but it is internally rehearsed. Negative synchronicity is not about attracting disasters with your thoughts. It is about becoming so coherent with a specific emotional pattern that you keep collapsing into the same outcomes. When you are entangled with scarcity, you see scarcity everywhere. When you are entangled with mistrust, you interpret neutrality as threat. When you are entangled with shame, you assume judgment even in silence. And because quantum entanglement shows that systems behave as unified wholes, the question becomes uncomfortable. What system are you reinforcing daily? Most people do not consciously choose fear. They inherit it. Childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, past trauma, these shape the baseline state of the nervous system. Over time, that baseline becomes familiar. Even if it is painful, it feels known. And the brain prefers the familiar over the uncertain. So you can unknowingly become entangled with your past. You replay old emotional states in new situations. Your body reacts before your logic does. A raised voice triggers an old memory. A delay in response triggers abandonment. And each reaction strengthens the internal system that says, this is how the world works. The danger is subtle because it feels logical. You say, I'm just being realistic. But realism is often shaped by repetition. If you have rehearsed worst-case scenarios for years, they will feel like truth. Here is a quiet test. Think about a challenge you are facing right now. Notice your first automatic sentence about it. Is it hopeful or defensive? Expansive or cautious? Does it assume possibility or does it assume limitation? That first sentence reveals your dominant entanglement. If you consistently align with doubt, you will not see options clearly. If you align with resentment, you will interpret actions through that lens. And slowly, life begins to mirror your internal coherence. This is where responsibility enters, not as blame, but as power. Because if negative synchronicity is possible, then positive coherence is also possible. The same principle applies. The system does not care whether the pattern is built on fear or trust. It simply maintains alignment. The risk of not becoming aware of your internal state is living on autopilot, entangled with wounds you never chose consciously. It is reacting instead of responding. It is repeating instead of evolving. And here is the deeper layer. If observation in quantum physics plays a role in defining outcomes, then your attention is not passive. Where you consistently place your focus strengthens specific neural pathways. It conditions your biology. It influences the decisions you make under pressure. You are not just watching your life unfold, you are participating in how it organizes itself. This realization can feel heavy at first. It removes the comfort of thinking that everything is random. But it also introduces something powerful. The possibility that by shifting your internal coherence, you shift the system you are part of. And that leads to a turning point. If your attention shapes alignment, then you are not merely an observer standing outside reality. You are something far more active within it, not controlling every detail, but influencing the way potential becomes experience. For most of your life, you were taught to see yourself as an observer. Reality is out there. Events happen, people act, circumstances unfold, and you watch, react, adapt. Even when you try to improve your life, the assumption remains the same. There is you, and there is the world, and the two are separate. But quantum entanglement challenges that quiet assumption. In quantum physics, observation is not passive. When a particle exists in multiple possible states, the act of measurement does not simply record what was already there. It plays a role in defining the outcome. The system shifts from potential into a specific expression when it interacts. This is often misunderstood in dramatic ways. It does not mean your thoughts magically control atoms at will. It means that interaction matters. Participation matters. There is no clean separation between observer and observed at the smallest scales. Now bring that idea inward. If reality at its foundation involves participation rather than detached viewing, then perhaps you are not just watching your life unfold. Perhaps you are part of the mechanism through which possibilities become experiences. You are not standing outside the river. You are in it. Think about how attention works in your own mind. When you focus on something repeatedly, it grows in clarity. When you ignore something, it fades, not because it disappears completely, but because your nervous system reorganizes around what you emphasize. If you constantly attend to threat, your body prepares for defense. If you consistently attend to opportunity, your perception sharpens toward openings. Your attention is not neutral, it is selective, and what it selects becomes more real in your lived experience. This is where the shift happens. Instead of saying, I am observing my circumstances, you begin to see that your observation is part of the circumstance. Your interpretation influences your next move. Your next move influences someone else's response. Their response influences the direction of events. It is a loop, not a line. Quantum entanglement shows that systems can behave as unified wholes. You are not a detached camera floating through space. You are a node within a vast relational network. Your thoughts affect your body. Your body affects your behavior. Your behavior affects your environment. Your environment feeds back into you. You are not outside the system. You are a bridge inside it. When you place your attention on a possibility, something subtle happens. You begin to emotionally rehearse it. You imagine how it would feel. Your physiology shifts slightly toward that imagined state. If the vision is consistent and coherent, your decisions begin aligning with it. You might reach out to someone you would have ignored. You might speak with more confidence. You might decline an opportunity that no longer fits. None of this looks supernatural, but it is transformational. The future does not drop into your life fully formed. It emerges from countless small interactions, many of which are shaped by where you consistently direct your awareness. This is why saying, "I am just observing," can be misleading. There is no neutral observation in lived experience. The moment you interpret an event, you add meaning. That meaning influences your emotional state. That emotional state influences your next action. You are not forcing reality. You are weaving with it. And here is the deeper implication. If entangled systems respond as unified wholes, then when you focus on a possibility, you are not staring at something disconnected from you. You are engaging with a potential that already exists within the larger field you belong to. Your attention becomes a point of contact between what is and what could be. This is not about controlling every detail. It is about coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align toward a direction, you reduce internal conflict. And reduced conflict increases clarity. Clarity changes behavior. Behavior shifts outcomes over time. You become the bridge between potential and expression. The real danger is not that you lack power. It is that you underestimate your participation. You think you are waiting for life to change, while your daily focus quietly reinforces the current pattern. But once you see that you are part of the process, something changes. You begin to choose your attention more carefully. You begin to notice the stories you repeat. You recognize that each moment of awareness is not passive, it is formative. And this realization opens another question, one that moves even deeper into the body itself. If you are a bridge between possibility and reality, if your participation shapes outcomes, then what about the biological structure through which you experience the world? What if even your cells carry layers of connection that go beyond what you consciously perceive? There is a question that begins to surface once you accept that quantum entanglement is real and that you are not merely an observer, but a participant in a deeply relational universe. If matter at its smallest scale can remain interconnected beyond distance, what about the biological structure that allows you to think, feel, and choose? What about your DNA? Your DNA is not just a static blueprint. It is a dynamic, responsive system. Inside nearly every cell of your body, long strands of genetic code are constantly being read, expressed, repaired, and adjusted. Genes turn on and off depending on environment, stress, nutrition, perception, and emotion. Biology is not frozen. It listens. For decades, scientists viewed DNA as a rigid program, fixed instructions determining your fate. But research in epigenetics has changed that view. Your experiences influence how genes are expressed. Trauma can alter biological patterns. Long-term stress can shift immune responses. Meditation and emotional regulation have been shown to affect gene activity related to inflammation and resilience. This does not mean you can rewrite your DNA at will. It means your biology is responsive to your state. Now, when some researchers explore the frontier of quantum biology, they ask a bold question. Could quantum effects, including forms of coherence or entanglement, play subtle roles in biological processes? There is evidence that quantum coherence may be involved in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even certain enzyme reactions. The idea that living systems might use quantum phenomena is no longer dismissed outright. But here we must move carefully. There is no solid scientific proof that human DNA remains entangled with distant versions of itself across space and time in the way spiritual language sometimes suggests. That claim goes beyond current evidence. What we can say is this: your body is not separate from the quantum fabric of reality. Every atom in your DNA obeys the same underlying laws that allow quantum entanglement to exist. You are not built from classical matter alone. You are built from quantum matter. This opens a doorway not to fantasy, but to humility. If your biological structure arises from a universe where non-local correlations are possible, then your body is not a disconnected machine. It is a living expression of that same relational fabric. Your cells are constantly communicating internally through chemical and electrical signals. Your brain operates through complex patterns of synchronized firing. Coherence is not a metaphor in your body. It is survival. Think about how quickly your body responds to a thought. Imagine biting into a lemon. Your mouth waters instantly. No physical lemon is present. A mental image shifts a biological reaction, or recall a painful memory. Your heart rate changes. Muscles tighten. The body reacts as if the event is happening again. Your DNA does not sit passively during these moments. Stress hormones influence gene expression. Repeated emotional states can shape long-term biological patterns. Now consider this possibility in a grounded way. If your inner state repeatedly signals fear, your body adapts to that frequency. If your inner state consistently signals safety and purpose, different biological pathways become more active. Over time, your system organizes around the signals you rehearse. This is not mystical entanglement across galaxies. It is embodied coherence, and yet there is still mystery, because the deeper you look into matter, the less solid and isolated it appears. The same quantum entanglement that links particles in laboratories operates at the foundation of the atoms composing your cells. While we must avoid exaggerated claims, we cannot ignore that life emerges from a reality far stranger and more interconnected than classical physics once assumed. So when people speak poetically about being connected to a future self, or to possibilities not yet visible, the literal mechanism may not be entangled DNA across time. But there is something real beneath the metaphor. Your brain can simulate future scenarios. Your nervous system can begin aligning with imagined outcomes. Your body can shift chemistry based on expectation. In that sense, you are already interacting with potentials before they become physical facts. The mystery of entangled DNA is not about proving that your genes are telepathically linked to distant timelines. It is about recognizing that your biology is sensitive, adaptive, and inseparable from the quantum foundation of the universe. You are not a sealed container of flesh moving through empty space. You are a dynamic process arising from a relational cosmos. And if your body responds to repeated states, if your internal coherence shapes biological expression over time, then the next question becomes practical. How do you consciously shift that coherence? How do you move from reacting automatically to intentionally tuning the internal state that organizes your life? If everything we explored is true, if quantum entanglement reveals that separation is not as absolute as it seems, if your internal state shapes the system you participate in, if your biology adapts to repeated emotional signals, then the question becomes practical. How do you apply this without turning it into fantasy? Mental non-locality is not about sending thoughts across the universe. It is about dissolving the artificial distance between who you are now and the state you want to embody. Most people try to change their lives by focusing on outcomes. They think about the promotion, the relationship, the financial goal, the healed body. They picture it as something ahead of them, something to reach, something to obtain. That subtle framing creates distance. Mental non-locality begins by removing that distance internally. Instead of asking, "How do I get there?" you shift to, "What is the state of the version of me who is already there?" This is not pretending, it is tuning. Imagine the future version of you who has solved the problem you are facing today. Not in detail, not in fantasy, just in qualities. Is that version calmer, more decisive, less reactive, more confident in conversations, more disciplined with time. Now here is the key. Do not focus on the external reward. Focus on the internal configuration. Quantum entanglement teaches that correlated systems behave as one. Mental non-locality applies this insight symbolically and practically. If you repeatedly embody the emotional and behavioral patterns of the version you want to become, you reduce the psychological gap between present and future. Your nervous system begins adapting to that state now. Take a simple example. Suppose you want financial stability. Most people focus on money itself. They obsess over numbers, they stress over timelines, but the financially stable version of you likely thinks differently. That version may feel less panic when paying bills, may plan more calmly, may delay impulsive spending. So instead of chasing the number, you practice the state. When a small financial decision appears today, you pause and ask, how would the stable version of me respond? Then you act accordingly, not dramatically, just slightly differently than your old pattern. That small shift is coherence in action. Mental non-locality is not visualization for escape. It is rehearsal for alignment. Close your eyes for a moment and bring to mind a challenge you are dealing with. Notice your current emotional reaction. Is there tension in your chest, tightness in your jaw, a rush of urgency? Now imagine you are speaking from the perspective of a version of you who has already navigated this successfully. How does your breathing change? Does your tone soften? Does your posture straighten? This is not magic. It is physiology. Your brain does not sharply distinguish between vividly imagined states and real experiences. When you repeatedly imagine acting with calm confidence, neural pathways strengthen. When you repeatedly rehearse fear, those pathways strengthen instead. You are training your internal system. The mistake would be thinking this replaces action. It does not. It guides action. Mental non-locality means you stop waiting for circumstances to give you permission to feel confident, secure, or worthy. You begin practicing those states in advance so that when opportunities appear, you recognize and step into them without shrinking. It is like tuning an instrument before the concert begins. If you wait until the performance to adjust the strings, the music will suffer. But if you tune beforehand, the notes align naturally. In the same way, when your internal state matches the qualities of the future you desire, your decisions become more consistent with that direction. You speak differently. You notice different openings. You tolerate uncertainty with more steadiness. Over time, the external reflects the internal shift, not because the universe is granting wishes, but because your behavior and perception are now aligned with a different pattern. This is the practical edge of quantum entanglement applied psychologically, not literal faster-than-light messaging, but the understanding that separation between present identity and future possibility is often a mental construction. And when you begin living as if the system is already unified, something subtle changes. The chase relaxes, the desperation fades, there is less forcing, more coherence. But coherence requires integrity. If your words say one thing and your daily habits say another, the system splits again. So the real work is not dramatic, it is consistent. Small choices, repeated states, honest self-observation. And as these shifts accumulate, the idea of separation continues to dissolve, leading toward a final integration where science and lived experience converge in a single grounded realization. There comes a point where the tension between science and spirituality begins to dissolve, not because one defeats the other, not because equations suddenly turn into poetry, but because both, when taken seriously, point toward the same quiet realization. Separation is not as solid as we once believed. Quantum entanglement did not emerge from wishful thinking. It emerged from careful experiments, mathematical rigor, and repeated testing. And yet, what it reveals sounds almost philosophical. Systems that appear divided can behave as one. Distance does not always break correlation. The deepest layer of matter is relational. For a long time, science focused on breaking reality into pieces, atoms, particles, forces, smaller and smaller components. This approach built extraordinary technology and understanding. But as physics went deeper, the pieces refused to stay isolated. The more precisely we looked, the more interconnected everything became. Spiritual traditions, in their own language, have always spoken about unity. Not in terms of particles and equations, but in terms of belonging, wholeness, and shared essence. For centuries, these ideas were dismissed as unscientific. Now, without using mystical language, physics itself suggests that the foundation of reality is not built from disconnected fragments. This is the final unity, not a fantasy of instant manifestation, not a denial of physical laws, but a grounded recognition that you are not separate from the fabric you move within. When you truly absorb this, something shifts in how you experience daily life. Conflict softens, not because problems disappear, but because you stop seeing yourself as an isolated unit, fighting against an external world. You begin to see interactions as exchanges within a larger system. When someone reacts with anger, you understand there are layers beneath it. When you feel fear, you recognize it as a pattern moving through a connected organism, not a personal defect. Quantum entanglement shows that parts of a system cannot always be fully described independently. In the same way, you cannot be fully understood outside the web of relationships, history, biology, and environment that shape you, and others cannot be understood in isolation either. This realization creates humility. It also creates responsibility. If you are part of an interconnected field, then your state matters. Not in a dramatic, supernatural way, but in a practical one. Your calm influences conversations. Your clarity influences decisions. Your integrity influences trust. Every small act ripples through networks of relationships. You begin to live less reactively and more consciously. The final unity is not about controlling reality. It is about aligning with it. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions move in the same direction, you experience coherence. That coherence feels like peace. It feels like grounded confidence. It feels like not needing to chase validation from the outside. And something else happens. Fear of isolation weakens. If the universe at its core allows for non-local relationships, if everything once emerged from a single origin, if your body itself is a network of synchronized processes, then the story of absolute aloneness loses credibility. You may experience solitude, you may face personal challenges, but you are not fundamentally cut off from existence. You are an expression of it. This does not remove uncertainty from life. It changes how you stand within it. Instead of resisting unpredictability, you engage with it. Instead of demanding guarantees, you cultivate coherence. Instead of waiting for the world to change so you can feel secure, you begin organizing your inner state first. Science calls it non-locality. Spiritual language calls it unity. Psychology calls it integration. Different words, same direction. When you stop dividing yourself internally, when your intentions match your actions, when your beliefs match your behavior, you experience personal entanglement in its healthiest form. Your internal system becomes consistent, and consistent systems are powerful. The final unity is not an abstract concept floating in space. It is lived in small moments, in the way you breathe before responding, in the way you choose trust over suspicion, in the way you act from the version of yourself you are becoming rather than the wounds you are leaving behind. Quantum entanglement opened the door by challenging the myth of separation in physics. The real transformation happens when you allow that insight to reshape how you see yourself. You are never a disconnected observer drifting through a cold universe. You are always a participant in a vast relational whole. And when you live from that awareness, something inside you settles, not because you have all the answers, but because you finally understand that you were never outside the system to begin with. Quantum entanglement shows us something simple and powerful. Separation is not the full story of reality. At the deepest level, the universe behaves as a unified system, and you are not outside of that system. You are part of it. When you shift your internal state, you are not escaping life. You are participating in how it unfolds. Your attention matters. Your coherence matters. The way you think, feel, and act creates alignment inside you, and that alignment changes how you move through the world. If this perspective changed something in you even slightly, write in the comments, "I am part of the whole. That's how I'll know you stayed until the end." And if this resonated with you and you want to go deeper, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen now. Keep exploring.